Everybody, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com, and I wanted to pop in briefly this afternoon to show you some projects that I made using the really fun bundle that's called Amazing Silhouettes. And you can find the products in the new mini catalog. This is the catalog that I'm talking about. And it is just a really beautiful set of products. They're on page 40. So let me flip over to page 40 and you will see that you've got a really pretty stamp set, and then you can't really see the dies here. I'm going to show you those in just a minute. But I'm going to make a couple of quick projects and I think inspire you to use these stamps and dies and make some projects of your own. This is the stamp set. It's the one that you just saw pictured in the catalog. But let's take a minute to look at the dies. They're really just fun. I love dies that can be used for multiple projects, and these definitely fit the bill. It's a little difficult to see these, so I'm going to turn them right side up, and you will be able to see the words that are included. You've got thanks, amazing, R-A-R-E, and you. And the way these dies work is you have a really pretty script that, if you look at the thanks here, you can see the thanks and script. And then there are background dies that are thicker. So you cut out your background, you cut out the foreground, and then you put them together. And it's easier to see the pieces that are actually cut out. But they're very, very versatile, very fun to use. I'm going to put together some more projects using these particular dies, and I'll share those with you because there are some fun things that you can do with the dies themselves and just make some really pretty cards. I'm going to jump in, and the first card I wanted to focus on is the one on the left, and this is the one that has the single stamp. Let's just talk really quickly about the pieces that you will need to make this card. There are not many. One is a card base, and I'm using basic white, typical A2 cut to 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, so it gives you just a nice card base. Then I've got a piece of basic black. This is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, so just a little bit thinner and a little bit less tall than the A2 card. It's going to give you a nice border. And then the outside, or the white piece, and I already have that in my Stamparatus, that is a piece that is measuring 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I'll put these measurements in the description when I get done posting everything. But I've got my Stamparatus set up. Let me get that light off there a little bit so you can see a little bit better. I have this set up and I've purposely offset it so it's not directly in the center of the Stamparatus. I wanted to have that be offset just a little bit in the final design. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and stamp this. And I will show you the two colors that I used. They're nice and bright, and they work together well. I think it's important if you use two colors like these ones to make sure that when they blend, because they will, that the colors are going to blend okay. So this is sort of a reddish, kind of, sort of, and a blue. We're going to get a little bit of a purple where they meet, and that's a color that will work. So again, let me put my Stamparatus back in. The beauty of this stamp is it is so easy to use. I know you can't see me doing a lot of the stamping. Let me bring this back in so at least you can see it in the camera. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to stamp it with a polished pink. And I'm not going to put an awful lot of ink on here. I want to get a nice base coat for it. So I'm just going to put that polished ink, and then I'll bring that over, bring this back in the camera, and just give it a nice little push. And one thing, this is a distinctive stamp. And when you use these kinds of stamps, I really suggest that you put the ink on the stamp where you have the stamp lying down and you put the ink on directly, like you do on a Stamparatus. It just gives a little bit better coverage. And look at that. Isn't that beautiful? It is an amazing image by itself. And I think these are some of the images in the new catalog that frankly get overlooked a little bit, but when you have them and when you start using them, you will see how gorgeous they are. Before I put the blue ink on, because I am going to add a little bit of blue, I'm just going to get that ink off the stamp, the one that I just stamped up, and I'm using my chamois. It looks like it is an absolute mess. I've used it a lot, but the beauty of this is once I get done stamping for the day, I just take my chamois, put it under some warm water. I don't put soap on it, and I just run the water through and it's clean, good to go. Give it a nice little squeeze, and I also put it into an empty stamp case. Great way to save that and keep the water off of your project. So now I am ready to add that second color, and you can see on the finished card that that second color is mostly on the outside, although I did get some on the inside. For this I am using Misty Moonlight. It's just a nice deep blue, and when I do this I want to make sure that I don't want to get the ink all over the image. So I'm going to have a pretty light hand, and I'm also twisting the stamp pad. And the reason is I don't want there to be lines, you know, where the end of the pad is when I'm putting the ink onto the image. And you can see that I purposely did not get ink everywhere. I'm just going to bring that back over and make sure that's in the camera. Give that a nice little push. And there we go. It's that easy to get an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous image from this stamp set. And I wanted to take this out, and I want to bring this up a little closer to the camera so you can see the detail. There's just some really nice parts that give you great, great detail without having to do a lot. You saw how easy that was to stamp. And I'll tell you, my husband is one of my greatest critics, and I say that with all love and respect. I will do a project, I'll bring it out for him to take a look at, and darn it, if most of the time, or maybe even all the time, he's right. If there's something that looks a little bit off, or if he likes it, you know, he just gives me some really good feedback. When I showed him this card, he was really intrigued with the way that the image in the back, that white silhouette, looked, and wondered how in the world did I make that happen. And when I told him that it was a stamp, one stamp, he thought it was just incredibly impressive to be able to get that image by using a single stamp. And I think when you see this and when you use it, you'll say the same thing. It's just really, really pretty. So I'm going to just get the ink off of here because I am going to use this stamp again in a couple minutes. But I wanted to get that out of the way for a second. And we are going to continue down the path of finishing up the card that will look something like this when we're done. All right. So let's talk about some of the next steps. Let me bring this up a little bit closer, and you'll see that there's some texture on the front of this card, the one that I actually did initially. And for those of you who know me well, you know that the Tasteful Textile 3D embossing folder is one of my absolute favorites. I love it. It has just a fabulous, fabulous design, very, very versatile, and I use it an awful lot. So through the magic of Facebook, I actually have already taken a piece that I completed just before I started this live. And this will show you that every time you use that stamp and use the Misty Moonlight and the Polished Pink, those are the two colors that I used, you're going to get a little different look. And that's half the fun of it, right? Where you can get something that looks just a tad different. The only thing that is different between these two is I ran this one through the Tasteful Textile embossing folder. So I'm going to use this one, the one that I ran through the embossing folder, and just do a couple more quick things to it. I did want to put a little bit more embossing on that finished card just to set it off a tad, and I purposely, like I said, I pushed the stamped image to the left, so I felt I needed to do something over here on the right. And all I'm going to do, and this is really pretty simple, is I'm putting this into a scoring board, and I'm randomly picking this. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but I'm going to figure out about how close I can get to my stamped image, and I'm going to say about right here. So right at least on this scoring board, right at that 3-inch mark. And then I'm going to go over a quarter. So I'm going to go to, in this case, the 3 1/4. Go ahead and just give that a nice emboss. And then I'm going to come over one more time to that 3 1/2 inch. And I'm going to give that a nice emboss as well. And then I am simply going to flip this over and line it up into my scoring board so that I can see between where I did the scoring or the embossing. And I'm going to hit in between those two lines. I'll still have a spacing of 1/4 inch between those, but I'm in this case going at 3 1/8 and then 3 3/8. But it's really between the two score lines that I've already done. And it just gives it a really cool finish, I think. It makes it look a little bit more polished. So that's one way to add a little bit of interest to your card. Let's bring this back in, and we're just going to do a compare and contrast as we continue down the path. The next thing I'm going to do is I will go ahead and adhere my frame and the focal point together. And again, that frame is made out of basic black, and the frame measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The white piece was 4 by 5 1/4. So the basic black is just a little bit taller and a little bit wider. And I'm just going to put that right on the top. And when you have embossing texture on a piece of paper, especially if it's your focal point like this white one, be sure to put a little extra dab of glue in the corner. That way you can make sure that you're going to get that corner nice and tacked down to the framed piece. And then I also love Tombow because I can try to get this as straight as I can before I put it down. All right, and believe it or not, we're going to put that piece right on top of our card base. This is a very simple card when it comes to the layering. The pretty bling piece that we're going to do in just a minute, I think, is what really sets it off. Gives it some nice interest and gives it some depth. And then I'll show you the second card that is a little bit of a twist on this one. So all I've done, as you can see, is put some adhesive. I triple check when I put the front onto a card to make sure that I have the card opening the right way. I bet you've done what I've done, where you get done with your card and you find out, oh no, you put it on upside down. Well, that's why God invented scissors and paper trimmers, because then you can cut the front off and put it onto another card anyway, right? All right, let's now talk about the dies. And this is where the beauty of the dies that I shared with you earlier come into play. And the ones that I'm going to use for the card, there are only two. We've got the background thanks and then we have this scripted things, and they work together. The background is thicker, and the script goes really nicely onto the front. What I like to do with script like this is I will cut out a background piece. In this case, it's black. I wanted to bring the color of the frame into the design. And then I like to use two colors on the script. I think it really brings out the letters. And I wanted to play on the polished pink, which is the color of the paper in the front. And there's a lot of white in this card, which is fine. It works really well. But I wanted to pull the white in also. So I've got another of the scripted things that I die cut in white. And here's how I like to pull these together. I like to do the scripted pieces first. And there's a tool that I've had in my stash for 1,000 years. These are reverse tweezers, and they are awesome because you can push them and let them go, and they hold paper or embellishments and allow you to work on the paper or the embellishments while they do the work for you. So what I like to do is use these reverse tweezers, and this is not mystical or magical. You can see I actually die cut that from a scrap piece. I guess I didn't realize I had done some stamping on one of the sides. And then I am not going to get heavy-handed with the glue. I'm putting dots on here, and you'll see that better when I actually use the pink. And I'm going to just put some dots on here, and this is going to allow me to put my sentiment down on the background. And I'm just making sure that there's a little bit of adhesive on all parts of that script so that when I put it down, and I'm going to go ahead and put it down onto the black, and the white is going to be kind of in the background of the final script. And doesn't that just pop? It's just the coolest thing. And what's nice is if you use two colors, you don't have to get completely crazy if the first color that you put on isn't exactly in the middle. It doesn't matter because I'm going to be offsetting this anyway when I add the second color. I like to put the white behind whatever the color is on the top. I just think it adds a little bit more distinction. It gives that second color the opportunity to shine if it has a little bit of white behind. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going to grab it on the right, which allows me to turn this little guy over, and you'll be able to see this better this time as far as where I put the glue. I'm literally dotting it. I'm not going to get heavy-handed. And if I do get heavy-handed, let me show you something that you can do to make sure you don't get too much glue onto the other die pieces, because you don't want the glue to gush out. It can cause a real mess. So I really haven't put a lot of glue on here, but let's say that I think I might have put a little bit too much. All I would do is I would grab a piece of scrap paper and I would blot it off. So I've got a piece of scrap paper, and if I thought I had a little too much glue, I can just kind of blot that off, and that way the glue will be on my paper and I'll have just enough to add it to the letters. What's fun about this too is you can offset that background to be a thin line, to be a thicker line. You can offset it so the white is on the top, the bottom, the left, the right. It is all up to you. It's all about how you like it to look. And then if you use your Tombow glue, you're also going to have the opportunity to kind of move the script around so that you can see that background. Isn't that pretty? It really, really brings out the letters. If I lift that up, you'll see that it really brings the letters out. It's really kind of cool. All right, so we've got our letters together, and now let's talk a little bit about putting them onto the card. And I did put these on dimensionals. They are definitely off the front of the card. When I use letters like this that have a background in black and I'm putting that onto a light colored cardstock, I love using the black dimensionals. They really hide the fact that you've got dimensionals underneath. You don't see them. They blend in really, really well, and I think they just give it a really nice finish. And if you're using pieces like this where you have smaller areas and larger areas, if you use the smaller dimensionals, the black dimensionals come in two sizes, the regular and the mini. And I'm using the mini on these. I just want to have enough adhesion so I know that everything's going to be fine, everything's going to stick great. And even if I get the dimensionals a little bit off center, because they are black in color and I have that black cardstock in the background, they're really not going to be seen. And then another thing I like to do is you've got this T and a K. Well, use all parts of the dimensionals that you have. On the side, what's nice is you can cut off a strip and you can use that behind the T as an example. So I'm going to put this right behind the T here, and that's going to help me get that where I want it to go. And then I'm going to cut another piece that's about the same size, and I'm going to put that on the long part of the K. And that again is going to allow me to get the letters onto my project exactly how I want them to be. So I know we all do this because as crafters, we like to use all the piece parts that we have and put them to really good use. The one other tip that I would give you is before you put anything down on a project that has dimensionals, don't take the wax paper off all sides and just put it on a hard surface and give it a little push and make sure that there's no place that you have forgotten that might sag when you end up putting it on your project. And that way you're going to be assured it's going to sit up nice. It will be, uniform throughout. It will have a really nice height, a really nice dimension, and it will just look clean. And then go ahead and take off the wax paper. And I'm going to bring back in my reverse tweezers because I like to use these when I'm placing things onto the front of the project. It's kind of like a second pair of hands. And I can move this around and not commit to putting anything down until I like where it is. And I'm going to bring this so it's sort of kind of maybe about centered-ish. And then I'll go ahead and take my tweezers off, and I have my design done. And then I'll put a little bit of bling onto the front just to add a little bit of interest to it. What's also nice about the dies and the script on the dies is that you don't need to have them perfectly straight. There's a lot of forgiveness in them. Like that thanks, I don't know if it's straight. Honestly, I'm not sure if I care if it's straight. It looks fine, and it doesn't look like it's cockeyed going up one way or, down another way. So I think it's really a nice set of words that you can use for multiple things. For my embellishments, I'm using some matte black dots. Love these. And then also some of the new iridescent rhinestone basic jewels. And I am going to copy what I did before because it was kind of fun. And again, I'm not going to overthink this. I am just going to put some of these on. I do use the rule of odd numbers when I'm putting on bling, just because I do think that odd numbers look good when you are adding. And I'm also going to pair the black dots, I've got a larger one of the iridescent rhinestone jewels over here. So I've got a smaller dot. And then on the other end, I've got a smaller iridescent, and I'm going to bring in a larger black dot. I don't know. You may like that. You may think it's a little bit too precise. And then there's the card, at least this one. I'm going to show you one more. But it's really pretty quick. And again, I just love the way that that stamp works. It's so simple, but it gives an amazing, amazing result. So let's look at another version using essentially the same products. And this is one where, let me pull these kind of side by side again. You can tell that I use the same stamp. It is the stamp that looks like the tree. Can we call that a tree? It's this stamp. And the basic difference on this is that when I stamped the images here, I used multiple combinations of colors. I did the exact same thing as far as the stamping, meaning I first stamped in this one with polished pink, and then I came back with a light hand and I did Misty Moonlight, just like I showed you a couple of minutes ago. So on this card, I used multiple combinations, but the same stamping method. And I did pre-stamp another example, and I'm just going to talk to the colors that I used, and this will give you some more ideas of how to combine colors. And obviously you can combine any colors that you think would work together well. But let's look at the middle one. The middle is polished pink, Misty Moonlight, exactly the same combination as this card. The second one, and I'm going to the right, the second one was Balmy Blue first, and then the Misty Moonlight. So I brought the Misty Moonlight back just to give it a little bit of the same color on both of these. And then the third one, the one here on the left, was kind of a fun combination. I used a couple colors of purple, started with the Highland Heather, then brought in the Gorgeous Grape to give it a little bit of an outside definition. And then I was looking at it and I thought, you know, it could be really kind of fun to add a little bit of Misty Moonlight into that one, so that there's a little Misty Moonlight on the outside, and all three of them have that Misty Moonlight theme going through them, and they look a little bit more cohesive. And the way I did this in the Stamparatus is I took my paper, and just like when I did the other, I started by stamping in the middle. So I stamped that one, cleaned it off, and then I scooched my paper over. I stamped this one. I scooched my paper over again, and you'll see that I wasn't quite able to get it all the way to the edge where this stamp really should have been a little bit more to the left. Well, all you need to do is take off your plate, move it one in your hinge, and then you can bring it down and you can stamp that as well. So this Stamparatus design is amazing. It really, really does some cool things and allows you to do more stamping than many of the stamping platforms and tools that are on the market. I do want to tell you that this piece of basic white is a little bit different in terms of dimensions than this one. The one on the right is 3 3/4 by 5. And you're going to see why I did that in just a minute. But this one is 5 by 3 3/4. Okay? So when you get your design done, and I do recommend that you get a design that overlaps. It's just going to be more fun when you get your final card done if you see some of the colors kind of merging. When you get your piece done, you're going to want to grab your paper cutter. because we are now going to do some cutting. And we are going to cut the stamped piece into 5 equal parts. That's why I made the piece 5 inches wide. I wanted it to be simple in terms of me knowing where I needed to cut this piece for the design. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my trimmer and I'm going to put this at 1 inch 4 times because I'm going to end up with 5 pieces, and I'm just going to cut it. And you are going to want to try to keep them in order. It should be pretty obvious because we've used some colors that are very bright and easy to see. If you have a very intricate pattern and you need to make sure that you have your pieces in order, as I'm doing, just keep them in order as you're cutting. And we're going to end up with 5 pieces that are 1 inch wide because obviously we started with a piece that was 5 inches wide. And after you have those pieces cut, you have a lot of freedom in terms of how you want to put them back together. So what I would suggest is grab a piece of basic black, and this one is cut to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And the reason I did that is when I put that onto the card base that I'm going to use, I wanted to have a nice border around the outside. And I also wanted to make sure that these pieces were shorter than my black piece so that I'm going to have a frame all the way around my focal point as well. So let's talk about what you can do. And this is wide open. And really what I'm going to try and do, and I'll show you a trick that I use, is I am going to try and put these on so that they look like they're fairly uniform. And obviously I'd have to kind of futz around with this a little bit. And I could put them all at the same height. I can alternate them. I could put them so that they are maybe starting on the bottom left and going up gradually to the top right. There's an infinite way you can do these. And I just want to show you a couple of tips and tricks that I have. And I am going to pretty much follow the pattern that I used on this card where I've alternated them. I just think it looks a little bit more interesting where you don't see the design going completely left to right and you've got these cool little breaks. But let me show you how I did this. So I start on the ends. I am going to intentionally adhere this piece and this piece. And I am going to put them toward the top of the design. They'll look something like that. And I'll go ahead and I'll put some adhesive on. And I do recommend that you use Tombow for this. It's just going to give you a little bit of wiggle room if you want to wiggle the pieces. I'm going to bring that. I like to orient them sideways. That way I can see a little bit better when I'm trying to get them straight. And I'm just going to put a tiny border around the outside. You don't have to be completely perfect on this, and you'll see why as we continue. And then I'm going to go to the other side, and I am going to, again, add a little bit of Tombow. When you're doing this, make sure that you've got your design the right way up. I know that sounds silly, but it is important. And I'm just going to put that one right like that. And you know, they're going to look about the same. They should look like they're about the same height, and don't go crazy. It's all good. And then, believe it or not, I'm going to bring back in my Stamparatus. And you guys are going to think I'm nuts. But what's really cool about this tool is that you can use it like a third set of hands. So what I'm doing here is I want to find a line, and I'm going to use this line right here and this line right here, and they're going to be my center points. And when I get my card piece down here, and what I'm doing is I'm looking on both sides, and I'm trying to get it so this is going to be center. So if I get it right in the center, and then I'm just going to put it on these lines. So I'm just trying to get it centered in here. And then I'm going to stick on a couple magnets. And what's nice about this is I now have a place to work. I don't need to futz around moving this. I know where my center line is well enough. Is it perfect? It's perfect enough. And then I am going to put the center piece in. Here are my other two pieces. So I'm triple checking. I know that that's the right order. I'm going to put my center piece in. And when I put it in, I've got a great cheat sheet. I can see when that is in the middle, because I can see when this is lined up top and bottom. Isn't that the coolest thing? Maybe you've never used your Stamparatus as a measuring tool or something that, you know, will help you to get things centered if you want it to, and will hold projects down. I don't need to worry about if my piece is moving. It's not. And then I'm going to move this around, and I'm going to stick my piece down. And see those two lines? I'll highlight them in just a second. And I'm just going to try and get that about as straight as I can. And that's good enough. Yeah, it's good enough. So these two lines, because I made this piece 1 inch wide, that's 1 inch. So I can put my two sides, and I can also kind of visually see down here. There's my inch. It's close enough, right? Yeah, it works. All right, so it's like a puzzle. That means that these two remaining pieces are going to go in between what I've already done. And because they're going to be centered and look like they're purposeful, the whole thing is going to look like it's measured okay. Is it exact? No, but it's close enough. And it's kind of a trick of the eye, where it's close enough so no one's gonna know. And all I'm doing here is I'm looking vertically. I'm looking at this piece, and I'm looking at this piece, and I'm trying to get this one in the middle, and trying to get it about as close to the bottom edge as these are close to the top edge. And there we go. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's pretty quick. And again, using the Stamparatus just gives you a really cool tool. A cool tool. It's kind of fun to say. And I'm just going to put this one in the middle here. And you can see some of the spacing isn't exactly perfect, but you know what? I don't really care. I'm good. Okay. And there we go. So we have a really fun front piece for our card. Going to get my Stamparatus out of the way here for a second. I'll bring back the finished card. And you can see these are very different. I definitely brought the images more overlapped on this piece when I did the stamping than I did on here. But you know what? I like both of them. I think they're very fun. On this piece, I did run it through the embossing folder, and I probably will do that on this one. I'm not going to completely adhere this front down, but I will talk through what I did. It's not difficult from here at all. It's very, very straightforward. So to finish this card, what I would do is I would go ahead and adhere the front piece down. And then just like I did on the other card, I already put together the thanks. And I wanted to bring these two thanks in. And I did this intentionally. See how on the bottom thanks you can see more of the white background, and on the top you don't see as much of an outline. So you've got a lot of options. You can do this however you want to do it. And to finish this one off, I would use dimensionals. Put that right in that area, or you know what? I might pull it over here to the right. In fact, I think I like that because it really has a contrast between the Highland Heather, which is the color for the card here, the cardstock, and the Misty Moonlight. I think they work together really well. And it also pulls the Highland Heather in from the left. And then just like I did on the other card, I'd add a little bit of bling. And I'm going to pop that thanks up using the black dimensionals. But I wanted to give you a couple of different ideas of how to use these stamps. And I want to show you one other thing. If you don't have a Stamparatus, no big deal. You can come up with some really fun patterns with these stamps. This is one of the others that comes in the set. This is the one that looks like a group of leaves. And what I did for that stamp is I put it onto a block. Just got my block out, put the stamp on the block, and then I used the soft succulent, and I put the soft succulent onto the stamp, and then I put some evening evergreen, and I did that as a rock and roll, and I'm going to show you what I mean, and I'll do that in just a second. And then I also played around with the butterfly, and that is at least an idea using the butterfly. But let me show you what I mean by rock and roll. It's probably a term that many of you know from years ago, and I'll recreate this stamp. I'm going to just grab that and put that onto a block. And for a rock and roll technique, I tend to use 2 or more colors from the same color family. And that is why I chose to use greens. The reason is I am going to be inking up the stamp. So I'm going to ink it up with soft succulent. I'm just going to get a little bit of soft succulent onto that stamp, and I can turn it over and see that the soft succulent is nice and inked on there. I'm not going to stamp that off yet. I'm actually going to bring it in directly to the evening evergreen. And this is why I suggest that you use color